What's up, everybody? I wanted to make this video to explain the heroic roulette game challenge that I've made for myself and that I use to conduct my games here on this channel. I wanted to make this channel because I was looking for more advanced Marvel Champions gameplay, in particular trying to beat scenarios on heroic difficulty, which, if you have a history of playing various card games, if you have a relatively full collection, you find that even on expert difficulty, most scenarios are pretty manageable by most heroes if you're really building to beat the scenario. So I thought I'd take it a step further in my own personal solo gameplay and try to beat every scenario on heroic difficulty. And I found this to be a really worthwhile challenge. It's hard. You get really fun games because it really swings back and forth between what you do on your turns and then what the encounter deck throws back at you. A lot of times in standard or expert games, you make it through those first couple turns and then you just kind of coast the rest of the game. Heroic games are a lot more tense throughout the duration of the game. And so I really have enjoyed doing that. And I wanted to add another layer of challenge over it, which is this heroic roulette challenge that I started doing ever since the Sinister Motives box came out. And the idea here is that we're still going to try to beat every scenario on heroic difficulty, but I'm adding the restrictions of needing to use heroes that came from the corresponding wave of hero releases. So in the case of Sinister Motives, we have the two that came in the Sinister Motives box, Spider-Man Miles and Ghost Spider, but then also the 4 hero packs, Nova, Ironheart, Spider, and Spider-Ham, that came out after that but before the next box. So we have 6 heroes, pair them against 5 scenarios, and on top of that, I want to use each aspect at least once, because if we were just building to optimize each deck, we'd probably do, I think Justice is probably what I believe is the best true solo aspect. So adding this challenge of using each aspect at least once, and that makes for a better variety in decks and gameplay. So that's essentially the challenge. I'm going to explain now how I've set this up for myself for the Sinister Motives box, which will be my next series of gameplay videos. But if you want to just stop the video now, think about how you would do this for yourself. I think it's really fun. It adds sort of a puzzle layer to this game that is one of the reasons I enjoy these co-op games. Is there's sort of the story of going through the motions of hero versus villain, which is one of the hallmarks of Marvel Champions. But just from a gameplay and mechanics standpoint, I think this makes for a really interesting puzzle to solve. So I'll go about sort of my thought process for how I do this. We want to get a general sense first of the hardest scenarios, as well as the sort of weakest to strongest heroes. So I think most people would agree that Venom Goblin is the hardest scenario here. I then have Venom second, pretty close second actually. Venom is steady, so one of the strongest things we can always do in true solo is stunning and confusing. But against a steady villain, some of that angle of attack is taken away. Among the other 3, I think it's sort of even, and I've sort of let the unique things about the scenario dictate who I've chosen there. As far as strongest heroes, I think Spider-Ham, many people have this in the top echelon of Marvel Champions heroes, and for very good reason. The resource advantage that Spider-Ham gains from taking damage and getting those tune counters is just really, really wild. I mean, 2 to 3 extra resources per turn is not unheard of, and then throughout his entire identity-specific set, we've got lots of powerful cards. Easy to build around him with cards like Clarity of Purpose to get even more tune counters and more resources. So I think just the strongest generic hero. I've also got Nova ranked pretty high. Nova is a bit more scenario specific, I'll talk about him more in a second. And then I think Spider-Man Miles, I'll just call him Miles for now, but is also incredibly strong, but very dependent on being able to stun and confuse enemies. So not quite as good against Venom Goblin, who's steady and then stalwart, and Venom, who is steady. So now with Nova's entire set is sort of based around the Unleash Nova Force event, which says that whenever Nova defeats a minion or side scheme, he readies. And then because when Nova activates, we ready the helmet, so each one of those represents another resource from the helmet and another ready from Nova. So the perfect scenario for Nova, just without a doubt in my mind, is Venom Goblin, because Venom Goblin starts the game with 3 main schemes. So with Unleash Nova Force, we have the potential to defeat 3 schemes. I might have said side schemes when I was explaining Unleash Nova Force there, but it's any scheme. So with 3 schemes, we can get a ton of value from Unleash Nova Force and really keep up with the villain in a way that other heroes don't really have access to. And then I think it's fairly obvious as well to go with Justice. Because of those 3 schemes, we can use stuff like multitasking or the Crisis Averted Overwatch combo for really efficient threat removal spread across those multiple schemes. So I locked in this one first because it's the hardest villain and has, I think, the most obvious villain pairing. So now for Venom, I wanted to use one of these heroes. And so you'll note here we've got 6 heroes but only 5 scenarios. So one of these is going to be sort of kept in reserve, is my mindset, where we can sort of bring it out against either a tougher scenario from a different wave, or we can always just substitute him in if we struggle in one of these games. So I'm going to go with Spider-Ham against Venom. I think just matching power level, but also thanks to Spider-Ham's card, Cartoon Physics. This is the one that allows him to take a ton of damage, be dealt a ton of damage, but only take 1. And with Venom's ability, whenever we damage Venom, he gets extra boost cards. So we have the potential for really big attacks coming from Venom that we can't stun with Spider-Man, but with Spider-Ham, we can bring all that damage down to just a 1 damage attack. So I like the Spider-Ham pairing. And then just because of how hard this scenario is, I stuck it with Leadership. And I guess almost more so because of the card Clarity of Purpose, which is extremely strong combo with Spider-Ham. So another thing to look out for on the opposite end of the spectrum with what the most powerful heroes are is when we have an easier scenario, we can try to use up one of the weaker heroes in the game. So I would have Ironheart as one of the weaker heroes in the game. A very poor hand size in hero mode, not any value generating abilities from her alter ego and hero side. The adding progress counters mechanic, it's sort of a catch up for the first, while she's on her first version, because when she upgrades to version 2, she just becomes a 2-2-3, and which is just kind of a normal stat line for a hero, still no additional value generation. So I have Ironheart definitely in the bottom tier of heroes in the game. And Sandman, I do believe, is one of the easier heroes in the game. So I like this pairing to get our win with Ironheart out of the way. And now in the Sandman scenario, we have the City Streets environment, which adds sand counters and then discards cards from the encounter deck at a really high rate. But we can slow that down by exhausting characters with high attack to remove sand counters from here. So I paired this up with Aggression, because in Aggression we have lots of cheap, high attack allies like Thor and Hulk that can help us remove sand counters from the city streets. Protection is always a tricky one. This is probably the worst aspect just for solo play in general. And I really don't want to, technically within the rules I've set up for myself, we could play a single protection card and that would that would satisfy playing with the protection aspect, but I don't want to just make it an all-in basic aspect deck. I want to still use the protection cards to make the games interesting. But what we really want to look for is a scenario where we don't need to thwart that much, because that's what protection really struggles at. And we have the perfect scenario in the Sinister motive box for that, which is the Sinister 6. And that is because we have I don't have it able to grab here, but we're sort of counting down that light at the end side scheme from a really high threat total. The main scheme we do have to watch out for, but there's not too much in the way of side schemes. And in particular, whenever we beat one of these enemies, which the Sinister 6, if you recall, they all get drawn out. There might be 2 or 3 in play at a time, but whenever we defeat one of the Sinister 6, we remove 4 threat from a side scheme, or 7 threat if no other villain is in play. So we can actually sort of thwart just by attacking the Sinister 6 enemies. So protection is a good one here. And then if we're doing protection, I really like Ghost Spider. Lots of responses and interrupts in protection, because when we defend from an attack, we have counter punch or any of the defenses. Those are all interrupts and responses. So a good pairing here. And just another note on the protection, all of the Sinister 6 enemies have some negative effect when they attack and damage us. So with Ghost Spider, defense of 3, other defense buffs we might put in our protection deck. I really like this matchup a lot. Now, of course, there's 4 aspects, but 5 scenarios, so something needs to get duplicated. And then I'm also considering, I'd like to use the weaker villain here to keep the stronger villain in reserve for a future scenario. So we're going to try the Spider suit against Mysterio. And I could either do Justice or Leadership here. I actually haven't fully decided yet. I think I said I'm going to do Leadership, though. I think Leadership and Justice are the 2 really strong aspects. So I might end up doing Justice. I probably need to think about it a bit more, actually, to see what the better deck is. But, as long as we've got one of each, we've satisfied the Heroic Roulette game puzzle that I've set up for myself. And so we've got Miles in reserve. If we need to sub him in against one of these scenarios that we have trouble with, we can do that. Or just wait for, if you've watched some of my videos already, you see that we failed to beat Magneto on the first pass, so maybe we throw Spider-Man at Magneto in a future video. So there we have it. I just wanted to put that video out there because I refer to Heroic Roulette in a lot of my videos, and so I wanted one video to point you towards to show you what that actually means. And if you want to try this out for yourself against some of the other boxes, I think it's just a really fun way to play the game at a high difficulty level, but I hope you'll find that when you design your deck for the specific scenario, there's lots of ways that you can optimize things and find success even on heroic difficulty. Whereas if you build just a generically powerful deck, then you go up against a steady villain and a lot of your cards are dead. Or you go against Mysterio, who has tons of minions with exactly 1 health that you need to deal exactly 1 damage to, and you haven't built your deck in a way to deal with that. So encourage you to try this out. It makes for lots of fun games that I hope to show here on this channel. And you will see my gameplay videos from this. If you're watching this shortly after it came out, you'll see my gameplay videos for Sinister Motives. If you're watching this farther in the future, you can just check those games out right away. And I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.